Hello, EN112 students. This video recording is supposed to support the PowerPoint presentation that is available without the video in Moodle. And it will have two parts. The first part is a review of what we learned about the argument essay, and the second part will cover the logical fallacies part with more examples than what your book provides, and both parts will be on the next two upcoming quizzes in Moodle. So I would recommend that you make notes, and if there's anything that's not clear, please feel free to contact me and discuss. So first, let's start with critical thinking and try to figure out what exactly is critical thinking and why do we need critical thinking? Well, basically, critical thinking is nothing else but good mental habits that include mostly logical reasoning, analysis, and the use of evidence, facts, and good research. In many ways, this is similar to using some of the strategies that you should remember from your Composition 1 class, which included using comparisons, illustrations, examples, and causal analysis, which are also good ways of supporting a claim or an argument. So let's look at some of the practical examples and what does it mean when your course book defines critical thinking and arguments as thinking in terms of claims, reasons, and premises. So since now everybody is under the influence of the coronavirus scare, let's look at a claim example that we can make about this situation. So suppose somebody wants to claim that we should close schools and introduce restrictions to contain the coronavirus. That is a claim in an argument, right? And it's arguable because it is possible to disagree with it. And some people might want to say, no, we shouldn't close down schools and there is nothing to be afraid of. But in order to maintain this claim and to support this claim, we have to be able to answer the next question, which is, why is that so? And we can give at least three reasons or more general reasons. One, I would say that this virus moves rapidly and hurts elder people or people with preconditions. We have no vaccine or medication to stop the virus spread. And that's another reason why we should close schools and make some other restrictions. We can also use the supporting evidence that countries that introduce restrictions slow down the spread of the coronavirus. So this is the very basic and fundamental structure of a claim that relies on reasons and uses critical thinking. Now, in order to use critical thinking, you have to make sure that you are avoiding errors and that you are also looking at other options to make sure that what you are thinking is reasonable. Now, what else does thinking in terms of premises and assumptions mean? Well, your book mentions assumptions. So assumptions are basically beliefs and contentions that are underlying your argument. And to find what your assumptions are, you actually have to ask these questions. What is underlying all this, and where am I coming from? So, for example, you might find this answer to these questions. I assume that most people care about public health. Or you can say that I assume that using science and reason can help us cope with a crisis. So these are all assumptions that are often not openly stated but are sort of understood. Now, the next step is, once you already have your logic and reasons, then that you have to think in terms of evidence. So here is where research comes into play, and you need to find some reliable sources, as we already learned about how to do that in the library part of this class, to back up your supporting points and reasons that support your claim. So I'm just showing you one example, and remember that the first point supporting our claim that we should close down schools and introduce other restrictions was that this virus moves rapidly and can be lethal or deadly to the elderly. Now, how can I back up this reason? What evidence can I use? I can look at the numbers and the time frame, which I'm not doing right now, but I am sure if somebody was writing a paper on this topic would know where to find those numbers. You can compare death rates between age groups to support the claim that the elderly are more likely to suffer from this epidemic. You can give examples of countries where the spread was fastest and use those numbers to predict how our numbers will move just as fast. And finally, you can cite World Health Organization or Centers for Disease Control experts on how the virus spreads and why the elderly are more at risk. Now, another important part of good arguments and critical thinking is anticipating objections. So it's not enough to back up your claim with good reasons and evidence, but you also have to consider what other ways are there to think about your topic. So maybe somebody raises objection and says, but coronavirus is just another flu. Look at the numbers. Many more people died of the flu than of the coronavirus, which is true. Now, you have to be prepared to have a response and say, well, yes, but coronavirus is not really like any other flu. We do not know yet how it spreads. There is no vaccine, and even tests are not widely available. These factors make the coronavirus potentially more dangerous than other flu viruses. And we can also add that since testing is not yet common, there might be many more cases than what we know of. So it may not be true that many more people die of other types of flu than of flu caused by the coronavirus. Now, when you write an argumentative researched paper, you are following critical thinking and you are following that basic structure of argument that I just illustrated. So basically, you will make a clear and simple claim or thesis, use reasons that will be placed in supporting body paragraphs. Then the reasons are expressed in topic sentences at the beginning of your paragraphs and kind of keep the essay moving along. The paragraphs are developed by providing research evidence to back up the main point supporting reasons. You need to be aware of your assumptions. You don't always have to declare them openly, but you should be clear about them because they make you vulnerable. And if somebody reads your draft and kind of starts challenging your assumptions, you should be ready to address that. You definitely openly have to anticipate objections. What would someone who disagrees with you say? And you have to respond to those objections. And last but not least, don't forget that you have to generate interest in your topic. So you have to write an introduction to this essay, and you have to provide some context that explains why the topic matters to you or why it should matter to other people. Of course, you should also always give your essay a good title that supports the topic and supports this interest that you are trying to generate here. And finally, you should also include expert definitions if needed or as needed, and also discuss the history as the topic requires. So, for example, if you are writing a paper about the coronavirus and arguing that we should do something, you can use a definition on and describe what kind of virus this is, and also clarify the difference between viruses and bacteria, and provide a brief history of when this problem started and what needs to be known before we go into the details of the argument. So that's where we stop here. And this part of my lecture covered the basics of critical thinking and the basics of an academic argument based on chapter 3 in your book. And in the second part, we are going to cover chapter 21 and talk about logical fallacies, or about the issue of how can we avoid errors in our thinking.